dangers or hazards are associated with the operations that I'm doing there. And I think that's probably one of the things that has helped keep me safe is my attitude towards safety. I think is so important, and I try and stress that to students or others around, just to think about that. That's going to be your first strategy for keeping yourself safe. Is what do I need to do at this situation? Because you're going to be confronted with different exposures that could set you up for an occurrence. And so that's one of the best things I think that you can do. Over in the summer, we had a training class that we put on, and I just kind of talked about the different things safety related. And I tried to think from head all the way down to toe, what is it that I would need to do in order to keep me safe in any situations? And so as I've kind of rambled along talking about the things, afterwards Tammy had asked, can you do an outline basically of what you had talked about? And so I sent her an outline, and basically it started off with personal protective equipment. They call it PPE for short. And so thinking about what type of protection would I need, one of the ones that stands out would be safety glasses. What am I going to do to protect my eyes? One of these things, it's an incredible gift that we have, the gift of eyesight, and so you wouldn't want to risk losing an eye or having a serious injury by not having proper protection. And you know, in the shop, one of the policies is when we enter the shop environment, we always make sure we have our safety protection on. And it's not that maybe we're not doing something unsafe right then, and that's chances are we're not. We just walked in. Why are you getting on me about my safety glasses? But it could be that something's going on around you that's happening that you don't realize that you're setting yourself up for this occurrence. And so, I mean, I have to encourage students all the time, put your safety glasses on, put your safety glasses on, because someone could be running a piece of equipment over, they could be operating a hand drill and drilling, and just the amount of pressure that happens. I know in the summer when we were doing some drilling, one of the drills, actually the pressure that the student was applying on it, the drill flexed and it shattered. And at that instant, the pieces that fragmented went through the air. And so if you're standing in close proximity and a piece of shard metal or a piece of that drill bit was to hit you in the eye, it could be life-changing experience. You could lose your eyesight. You know, that's a kind of a focal area there that you might say, well, it's such a small place. The chances of that hitting me is so rare. It's going to hit me maybe somewhere else. It's not worth the risk. So when you're going to be in an environment where there's machining going on, definitely encourage you to wear eye protection. And there's different types. If you have glasses like me, these are larger glasses. You may have to wear a pair of goggles. And if it's something that, here's a smaller pair that you might wear that maybe you wouldn't have glasses on underneath, maybe you have contacts, but they would still have a wraparound type protection, and that would be sufficient. In some cases, it may take some OTGs, what they call them, over the glasses, which might be a larger pair. I'm looking, the pair that you have, but they still wrap, but they still are a larger pair. You have OTGs there? And so an OTG, these glasses are pretty large, but they still fit over these glasses, so they're called OTGs for that purpose. Definitely encourage you to wear something like this. They work, okay? You know, in proper wearing, sometimes students think, well, hey, I'm wearing them. I've got them on. I'm good. No, you're not. Proper wearing is important. Sometimes, you know, a student might have them down low and they're looking over them, and still you're setting yourself up for it. If you have something that's airborne, dust, grit, metal fragments. One night I was working on a surface grinder and I was doing some heavy grinding, and there was a lot of metal fragments airborne. I had safety glasses on, but I noticed as the night went on, my eyes were really irritated, and I thought, what is going on? And I looked in the mirror and my eyes were just bloodshot really bad. Ended up going to the hospital, and just the exposure to the dust actually getting around the glasses, I probably had them hung low, and they were getting in behind there. A better situation for that would have been a pair of goggles that would have provided extra protection to prevent that grit and metal fragments from actually just getting in my eye. They didn't get embedded, but they were scratching my eyes. So think about that. If you're doing something and there's a possibility that things are airborne or that you could get something in your eyes. Wear the appropriate eye protection on that. Okay, so PPE going on, maybe a eye protection, but a face shield. If you had something that you were using like a grinder, and so this could be cutting through, and you might have sparks that are going, you might be using it and sparks are going. Face protection over could be something that could protect you from the sparks coming at you, and so that's helpful. Respirators, so now thinking eyes down to the nose, breathing. If you have fumes or if you have just airborne particles, a respirator is very important to protect the respiratory tract. And so with that, it could be that as simple as a dust mask that you'd put on, a paper dust mask. But if it's something that's more involved, that you're going to have fumes or dust that's in the air, that's beyond that, you might wear a face mask that goes around and actually seals better. And you have canisters or cartridges on your on the nose canister here. And so this canister is specific for the environment that you're exposed to. Is it paint fumes? Is it something else? So whatever you're being exposed to, make sure that the canister that you're using is appropriate for the environment that you're in. Is it dust? Like, take for instance, when I'm working in the yard and I have the leaves that I'm mulching up. The organic matter that I'm mulching up is airborne, and so I don't want to take that into my lungs and have that heavy feeling in my chest after inhaling that. So think about it. What am I going to get exposed to? Is it an overexposure situation? And am I wearing the proper protection? As if we're in a situation where we're using something that's loud, this grinder here on a thinner piece of metal like this, the noise level could be elevated, and so if I'm grinding, it could be something that, hey, I need to have some hearing protection on. What's some of the types of hearing protection that you might be familiar with that you could put on or wear that would help you?
Earplugs or headphones?
Earplugs and the headphones, yeah, absolutely. And so if you're exposed to that, just simple earplugs put in, and I don't know if they have, I'm looking over here, they may have those types. They do? Did somebody say they do? You said that? And so it's something that you can put in to help protect your hearing. You know, the thing is, say I'm over here and I'm wearing hearing protection, I'm doing this, grinding on this, I'm being safe. Let's say someone might be 10 feet away or 20 feet away. Even at that level, the noise level could be loud enough. And if you notice that, hey, that's annoying, that is really loud, it might be worthwhile to think, maybe I should be having some hearing protection on as well, so that you don't get that overexposure. Now, I'm not sure as far as if you're going to be doing welding. Is that something possibility?
Probably not. Not on the large scale.
Not on the large scale, but it could be possibly. Pardon? A couple of situations where you may have to do that, or?
No, only a couple of the kids.
Okay. Probably the overkids. Okay. Well, let me just touch on this real quick. If you're in an environment where there's welding going on, you could be having welding going on across the room, and you turn and it's like it's a bright light. And, hey, I think I'll watch that. You could be setting yourself for an eye injury. And so some of the things is that we've done in the past is there's a welding curtain that could be put up. And so the welding curtain, it may be an orange color or red, but it's a tinted curtain. That curtain could block down the light by 80%. And so you protect your eyes just by having that curtain up. But one of the things is recommended, don't watch that light because you could end up with an eye burn. And so think about if you've been in the sun too long, you get a sunburn, you think, oh, my skin stings. Well, it's like getting a burn on your eye. And when you close your eyes, that feeling, that stinging feeling could be there. Yes, if you're there and you have, there could be metals when you're welding could be harmful. And so understanding the metals that you're welding and taking proper precautions with that, exhausting the air out. Some metals, as an example, one of my students was welding galvanized pipe, And he had told me later, he says, Mr. Simon, my head hurts. And so I'm thinking about what has he done? Well, he was welding that metal. He ended up at the hospital later that evening, and they had what's called like a welding fever, galvanized fever, because of the fumes that were coming off the zinc. That exposure had set him up for this severe headache that he had. It was so bad, he said, I've got to go to the hospital. I'm hurting here. And so, not understanding the metals or the precautions that should be taken in that situation. Maybe a respirator would have been better that's sealed off and had the proper canisters. But definitely a welding helmet. The welding helmet protects your eyes with the dark lens. You put the welding helmet on, unless it's one of the electronic, the lens is so dark you can't see out. But when the light is bright enough, you can actually see through and watch what you're welding. The welding helmet goes down, covers the neck, covers the face, and so when you're welding, it's going to protect your skin. One of the areas that even having welding helmet comes down here is this area here can get burned bad. I've actually had that area there get burned so bad it actually peeled because it had overexposure. The arms, you have a welding glove that comes up far enough. I call it like a gauntlet, but it comes up higher. So you're welding. The heat that's around that area can be so severe, and the popping of the molten metal could damage your hands. So you want to make sure you have your arms covered and have the proper gloves on. Appropriate clothing, I think, is important. In the summer, I was talking about some of the clothing that you wear might be more of a polyester. Some of the jackets, maybe you definitely wouldn't want to wear shorts around the metals if you're welding like that. But even the type of clothing that you wear in an environment could set you up for an injury. Loose clothing around rotating equipment could set you up for being caught in the machine. I noticed on the sign on the door it said closed-toed shoes. If you're wearing open-toed shoes in an environment like this, you set yourself up for an injury. There could be hot chips or something heavy fall on your foot. In some environments, they make it mandatory that you wear steel-toed shoes just to protect your feet in case of something fall. So if you're going to be in an environment, make sure that you're wearing proper clothing. One of the things we talked about was gloves. If you have gloves on, there's a right time and a wrong time to wear gloves. Obviously with the welding, protecting your hands. But if you have something heavy that you're going to carry, it might have sharp edges, that you might want to wear something to protect your hands there. If you're handling something sharp, definitely. But if you get around something rotating like a hand drill, I wouldn't wear gloves. If you're at a drill press, which basically is a drill that's on a machine and your drill is rotating, definitely do not wear gloves. I told the story in the summer, one of my apprentices years ago, yeah, he had gloves on, and he was running a drill press, and his hand got caught in the rotating drill bit. And the bad thing about that was, once it got caught in there, the machine is turning, and so until he can stop the rotation, once it's hooked onto the drill bit, it continued turning and tearing up the inside of his hand because it was hooked into the glove and he couldn't get away. And so he showed me he had a rather extensive scar on his hand where they had gone in afterwards and numerous surgeries to go in and repair that area. So just think about it. The reason why we talk about this is not to scare you away from it, but to keep you safe when you're in this environment. And it's important. If you're introduced to these situations, these stories where others have been damaged, it's kind of like paving the way. Hey, I learned this. I'm not going to set myself up for this occurrence, this accident. Okay. He pointed out the long hair. Long hair around the rotating equipment can set yourself up. I may have talked about in the summer. You could be running a mixer at home, a hand mixer, electric, and it's running and it's turning. If your hair is long enough and was to get caught in that hand mixer, you pull it out of there and get distracted or something like that, and your hair get caught, it could wind it up in there. I think I told the story about a woman who was driving a go-kart and her hair was long enough that it actually got caught in the chain the chain drive. And so anytime that you're around rotating items, you set yourself up for an injury. One of the stories I believe I'd mentioned in the summer was there was a guy, and this was actually an article in the newspaper. He got out of his vehicle, he was having problems, and he got underneath there to work on it. Well, it got caught, his hair, he had really long hair, and it got caught in the vehicle's power takeoff, it said. So I'm not sure which, but anyway, it was a vehicle and it was caught in the hair, or the rotating. And what happened, now I know this sounds bad, but it scalped him from his eyebrows, it said, all the way to the back of his neck. It pulled his scalp off, and when he came out from underneath the vehicle, he looked at himself in the mirror and he said he thought he was dead because the amount of blood that was coming out. Well, they showed a picture of him in the hospital, and they reattached the scalp, and he was sitting there. He survived, but because he didn't realize the long hair getting caught in this rotating vehicle, this part on the vehicle, and it scalped him. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're around rotating items and you have long hair, pull it back. One of the best methods is to keep it pulled back. There was a student yesterday of mine. I had told her repeatedly, please pull your hair back. Please pull your sleeves. She was running a drill press. The sleeves back, she had baggy sleeves on. I must have told her 3 times. And finally, I said, listen, I keep telling you, but you're not listening to me. I'm serious here. If you get caught in that, they're going to say, what happened? Did you tell her? And I'm going to say repeatedly. But the injury could still happen. So at that moment, she understood I was being very serious, and she took my advice. Moving on to bloodborne pathogens. Are you all familiar with bloodborne pathogens and what that is? Yeah, it's something that could be a disease or a germ in your body that could be passed on to others. And so if you have that kind of injury where there's blood, you want to take precautions. Avoid that blood as best you can. I'm looking up here, there's a first aid cabinet I see, there's an eye wash station. I would suspect that there's probably latex gloves over there as well. If a situation comes up and you have to handle that blood or that situation, make sure you wear the proper protective clothing or gloves in that situation. I see Rick's getting this. A whole kit. Bloodborne pathogens? Yeah. You know, I tell the story about, I guess it was probably my first year teaching. I was out at one of the schools, PRP, and had a situation where a student had been injured. Another student had spot welded 2 pieces of metal together. And so they was shaking the metal, and another student didn't know that was going on, and it turned. And when they turned, they actually came in contact with that sharp metal right in the arm. And chances are we might be exposed to these type of sharp metals, but the student didn't know, jabbed him in the arm. He was bleeding pretty bad. And I was probably 15 feet away, and the students had let me know we have an injury. And I turned, I said, go to the sink. And so they were on walking, we were parallel, we got to the sink, I evaluated the situation and was cleaning the student up. Well, I turned and looked, and the other students had paper towels and was wiping up the blood. And I'm thinking, oh no. You know, they set themselves up for exposure. And so we had to talk about why you don't want to do that and what you set yourself up for. And so as a result, you know, encourage the students, do not, I understand you're helping, but do not clean that up. There's personnel, custodial staff that will clean that up, and they'll take those precautions. And the students were just being helpful. But you set yourself up for that exposure. So just let the proper people handle it, or if you're going to be doing it, make sure that you're wearing rubber gloves and take the proper precautions. You know, I'm not sure. I asked this morning if you guys would ever be going back into the big shop area, and I was told that you wouldn't be, and that only certain personnel are allowed back there, and if we needed something cut, back there, we would ask, and it would be handled there and then brought back out. So in my shop at Southern, students are running equipment all the time, and I'm thankful that the occurrence of severe injuries have been very, very limited over the years. Last year was probably, it was the worst occurrence that I've ever had. I mean, I've never had a situation like this. And what happened was a student was running a milling machine and it was rotating, and he turned the machine off. Part of the lesson is that when you turn the machine off, you hit the brake and stop this rotating cutter, which is very sharp. It cuts metal with ease. So you can imagine how easy it would cut skin and bone. Well, the student, when he turned it off, it was at the end of class, and I think he was probably distracted, and he reached in to grab his part. Well, the cutter was still turning, and the cutter went between his fingers. And as it went through, it chopped, it was biting the side of his finger, but it plunged in the right at the where the two meet, and it was pretty severe. And he got my attention, and I went to get gloves and went over. By the time that I got back, there was quite a bit of blood there on the floor, and so I took him and cleaned it up. Well, if I'm going to handle a situation, about the best that I'm capable of doing is cleaning it up, assessing the injury, and putting a Band-Aid on it. That's my qualifications, all right? If it's anything beyond that, we get EMS involved, or you have to go to the doctor or to the hospital. And so beyond that, well, he went to the hospital. 27 stitches later, he was stitched up, and but he understood that at that moment, he should have been paying closer attention, and that he put himself at that risk, and he was severely injured. Everything healed up. He's continued in the shop and has never skipped a beat. And I'm thankful it wasn't worse than what it was, because it could have been.
Hey,
So, yes.
I was say, you touch on briefly on how you would not clean up the person, but clean up what he left behind. What do you do
Well,
for the...
in the shop area, the students are instructed, do not mess with that. And so if I'm going to be cleaning up, obviously I'm going to wear rubber gloves. And if it's a small amount, I will wipe this up and put it in the garbage can. What we'll do is we'll take a bleach and water mixture, 50-50, which is to neutralize that, and we may spray the area, wipe that up, and dispose of it. The custodial staff will likely do the same thing. But even in cleaning up the area where, like we go to the sink, if there's blood in the sink, what we'll do is we'll actually spray down the area with this bleach and water mixture, which neutralizes, and flush the area with water and run it down the drain. The gloves that I take off, I will take and turn the one glove inside out, and then I will take and grab the other glove and I will pull it inside out and dispose of it. As far as an injury on the hand, what we'll do is we'll take a medical soap. They call it green soap, and it has alcohol in it, and it stings. But we'll wash up the area thoroughly, and at that time be looking at it and see, is it something that's worse than just a Band-Aid would take? If it is, again, we'll send them to their doctor, or if we may have to get EMT involved. But we'll clean up the area with this soap and put a Band-Aid on it. Does that answer your?
Yeah, I think for these guys, probably the thing to do is avoid the area and get somebody to qualified to clean it up.
Part of our policy is that if it's any injury, we report it to, the students are reported to me, because I'm aware of it, made aware of it, and I'll take proper action. If there's anything, I'm telling you, it goes beyond just cuts. It could be a burn. It could be lightheadedness. If you have a feeling of lightheadedness, you're exposed to something that is a chemical, fumes. Something you say, hey, I was using this and I'm just not feeling right. The good thing about in this area here, we have tall ceilings. If you're using something like a paint or a cleaner, you want to have adequate ventilation, and so that you don't become overcome by the fumes. All right, so kind of keep that in mind. If it goes beyond just cuts, I know I kind of spent the extra time on the physical cutting, but it could be something beyond that. It could be that you're exposed to a fume. It could be a cleaner, an adhesive. It could be a paint. So any of those things that you might be exposed to. And that the next item is actually proper ventilation. You know, at this moment, I think I'm gonna stop. There's an item on down, it's called MSDS, Material Safety Data. And I actually fell in later on, but I see everybody typically has these smartphones. I wanted to ask you to go in on the internet and pull up an MSDS for a product that likely would be used in this environment. And one of the things is we use maybe an acetone. And if you're not familiar with how to spell it, do a MSDS and then acetone, A-C-E-T-O-N-E. It's a lot of times used for cleaning, but the reason why I want you to do that is to look it up and see what type of precautions would be used for that. So I'm going to type it in as well, MSDS and acetone. Also, someone else go look up sodium bicarbonate. Is that what you said? You've got that one? Okay, so I'm looking down through here and there's numerous ones. You want to take the first one? Did you look it up, or are you on social media? Do you have it?
I've got sodium.
Baking soda? Yeah. Yes, you have it? Okay, which one did you go to?
I don't know. It's an education.
Okay. All right. He has it. Now, some of the things is thinking about the ventilation. What's some of the categories that are listed on that you see for the MSDS?
Hazards identification.
Hazards.
Yeah. Composition.
The composition, so the makeup of it.
First aid measures.
All right. First aid measures. What's listed under the first aid measures?
Skin, eyes, inhalation, ingestion, advice to physician.
What was the last one?
Advice to physician.
Advice to physician. Okay, I think he said, was it the eyes?
Yeah.
And then the nose, inhalation?
Yeah.
What was it? Ingestion? So you drank it or something?
And advice to physician.
Advice to. So what happens if you get it in your eyes? What's recommended? Do they say?
Rinse immediately with plenty of water, also under the eyelids for at least 15 minutes.
Rinse immediately for 15 minutes, continuing.
And obtain medical attention.
And then obtain medical attention. Well, how about inhaling? What do they say for that?
Move to fresh air in case of accidental inhalation of vapors. If not breathing, give artificial respiration. If breathing is difficult, give oxygen. Provide a qualified operator is available. Call a physician immediately.
All right. So you're going to get them to some fresh air. You may have to do CPR on the person. I know they didn't say CPR, but that's what they're implying there. And then get help from a physician. The reason why I want to make you aware of this, if you have a situation where something comes up and they may have an MSDS catalog here, but you're exposed to something, and if you can identify what that is, what type of help do I need to give this person right now? And so a lot of times we have access to the smartphone, which can give us immediate information. What about, what other things are listed on the MSDS?
First, firefighting measures.
Firefighting measures? And what would be, for acetone, what would be a firefighting measure?
Use alcohol-resistant foam, carbon dioxide, or dry chemicals.
A fire extinguisher. But it has to be the proper fire extinguisher. So what was the type that it was recommended?
Alcohol-resistant foam, carbon dioxide.
Alcohol-resistant foam, carbon dioxide. And so, that's an interesting thing, and I know that one of the lists on the outline is to talk about fire protection. But knowing where the fire extinguishers are located in the room is really good to have. And so you look around, you find location for a fire extinguisher. But then when you go to that fire extinguisher, is it over there? When you go to the fire extinguisher, is to turn and look, is it the appropriate fire extinguisher for the situation I have if there was a fire for acetone? And so what was the one that you had, sodium bicarbonate?
Yeah.
So with that one there, what's some of the information that you'd have on that? You said it's baking soda?
Yeah.
All right.
First aid measures, firefighting measures, accident release measures, all that.
Okay, there's, as you keep on going down, both of you all, there's something else that I'm going to be looking for as well.
Handling and storage.
Handling storage, keep on going.
Exposure controls.
That's it. Well, exposure controls, what's listed on that one?
Engineering controls facilitates storing and utilizing this material should be, or facilities utilizing and storing this material should be equipped with an eye wash facility and a reliable safety shower. Use adequate ventilation to keep airborne concentrations low.
And you have eye wash there. What about the exposure, are the exposure limits on there?
Engineering controls and personal protective equipment.
Okay, what's it have?
For personal equipment, it has skin protection, eye protection, respiratory protection, and additional recommendations.
So for the acetone, skin protection, eye protection,
Respiratory protection,
okay.
and additional recommendations, which is provide eye wash stations and work direction shower facilities.
So provide eye wash stations and shower
Yeah.
facilities. You know, something else I'm looking for is the limits. If you're using something, there's typical limits that have been established for this. If you're in an environment and it's fumes, the MSDS is going to give you limits for exposure. If it's particulates in the air, it's going to give you limits. And then just like that, if it's something where he's talking about the safety, the PPE, it's going to give you advice on that. If it's something about exposure to the skin, overexposure to a chemical like acetone can cause dryness, redness, skin could become start to crack. Overexposure could cause irritation, and so the thing is knowing about those and how to handle it. That's the kind of information that you would find on an MSDS, and so just know that that's available to you, and if you need that, to know where to get it. Okay. Okay, fire extinguishers is the next one. Selecting the proper fire extinguishers. You know, not all fire extinguishers are created equal. If it's an electrical fire extinguisher, for say electrical fire, you need to make sure that you have the right type of fire extinguisher, or you could actually make the situation worse. And so when you go to get the fire extinguisher, again, what type of fire am I dealing with? What type of fire extinguisher do I have? Is it appropriate for the fire that I'm dealing with? Okay. It's a situation or a story that I had. There was a student who had welded a seat for another student in auto tech, and he came to me and said, "Hey, tell the student that the seat has been welded and it's ready to go." I said, "Okay." And so I was eating my lunch. Well, after I finished, I thought, well, I'm gonna take my items out to the truck, and when I went to open the shop door, I'm looking, and the shop was cloudy, and well, come to find out, as I walked back through there, the seat that he had welded was on fire. And so as I go back to get the fire extinguisher, I thought, seat on fire, what type of fire extinguisher do I need? And when I went to the fire extinguisher, I looked and I read the label, is this going to be okay for that? And it was. So I go back there, and without going into a whole lot of detail, it was, I extinguished it, it re-extinguished. I ended up taking it outside and spraying it with a water hose, but it put it out temporarily, but it reignited. So, but there's some metals in particular that if it's on fire, like magnesium, you'll handle it completely different. A granular is what's going to be needed to smother the fire. And a magnesium fire, if you put water on it, it worsens the situation. Pardon? Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. It is so bright. I was talking with my apprentice classes about magnesium because in the daytime, my high school students, we were covering that about the fire extinguishers. And one of the students, the night school, the adults, said that they cut magnesium on a regular basis. I said, have you ever had a fire? And he says, yes. And he said, you want me to bring in some chips for you and you can burn them? And I'm like, sure, bring them in. So the day came, got the high school students together and said, we're going to burn this and see what it looks like. So we just had a small amount of the chips and we set it on fire, and the light was so intense. The way I describe it is looking at a star or something. It was so bright, it was blinding. And at that moment, I didn't realize that it was going to be that bright. And even though it was a small amount of chips, it was so intense, I thought, have I set myself and all these others up for an injury, an eye injury, just like welding, because I chose to burn this little bit of magnesium. And it burned out because it was such a small amount, but I was amazed at how intense that light was. So kind of keep that in mind. If you're, whatever the materials you're working with, try and get an understanding about it. Am I going to be safe in handling this? Am I going to be safe in working with it? And if something happens, what am I going to do? So that you're prepared. All right? Let me look. We've got more on the fire extinguisher. All right, the last line on the fire extinguisher was a line that I'm sure that's probably been in PSAs. And when in doubt, if you're not sure about the fire, if you have a fire and you cannot extinguish this, when in doubt, get out. Get out and get help. Get the professionals in to take care of the situation. As I looked around, it seems like I saw, well, there's the fire alarm. And so what you want to be able to do is to find where if you need to set off the fire alarm, find out where that's at as well. So know where those are in case you have to signal alarm and get the fire department in. Okay, floor hazards. If you're in the environment, you know the floor hazards, I know they're using a laser over here and it has wood in there. And as soon as I walked in, as I got closer, I could smell the wood burning. But if you're sawing wood and those kind of things, wood on a floor, a concrete floor like this can be very hazardous. It can become slick. If you're using a sand blaster, a media blaster, that media, the glass bead on the floor, can become so slick that you could actually lose your footing and you could fall. So kind of keep aware as you're walking through. If you feel the floor starting to get slick, you might want to stop and look and see what's this that's causing the floor to become unstable. Is it dust? Is it something else, some type of grit? Is it oil? Is it water? What is it that's under my feet that's causing it to be slick? But before you get there, one of the best things you can do is just kind of scan the area and look, are there any hazards before you proceed? Okay, so if there's something that's on the floor, I would think that they may have some oil dry. You can put oil dry down. If you have sawdust, that is actually an oil absorbent too, so it could soak up. So if you have sawdust available that you could put on a spill, that could soak it up as well. Chips, if you have excessive chips that maybe you're drilling or you're milling or things like that, if you have excessive chips on the floor, could cause the floor to become slick as well. And so here's the other thing is, if you're doing work, one of the best things you can do afterwards is just clean up. Rather than leave the area messy and someone else come in behind and then have an accident. You know, there's two situations that I think about with students that I had. At one of the schools I taught at, they came from the main building to another outbuilding, and they would put ice melt down. And the students, as they would walk through this, it was on their feet, and they would migrate that ice melt down the hall, and it was into the shop. And so because of that, that made the floor slick. And I had a student who was actually running through the shop, not doing what they should be doing, operating unsafely, and went around a bandsaw. And as he did, his feet came out from under him, just as though somebody had a rope and had yanked the student's feet out, and he went down so fast. But as he went down, his head went right past the corner of the table. And I witnessed this. I saw him. I'm seeing him run through. I'm trying to make him stop. Anyway, he went down in an instant. And so he was fortunate he didn't hit the table. When he hit the floor, he didn't hurt himself there. But you've got to be aware that those kind of situations can cause even worse accident. Okay. Another situation was a student stepped on a piece of plastic. It was a piece of plastic sheet. Now you may be using this in the robotic build to make a cover, but that plastic sheet, it was transparent. He didn't really see it, and as he walked past a saw, he stepped on it, and it slipped out. His foot slipped out, and he went all the way down to the floor. He wasn't hurt, but it sure surprised him, and he could have had an injury, but he didn't. It just caught his attention. Well, one of the best things to do then is pick that item up, and so that you don't set someone else up. Hey, something else that could be hazardous on the floor is a round object. If you have something that's round and you step on it, it could be just like a skate, and you could lose your footing and go down. So just kind of be aware of the surroundings as you walk, and then if you make a mess or you have something that you've dropped on the floor, go ahead and pick it up to protect others from an occurrence. Okay, general safety items, and this was kind of like a review that we've gone over. Eye protection must be worn whenever in the shop area, whenever hazards exist. And I know that we kind of have, right now, a relaxed policy. We're around the workbench, nobody's doing anything. But just kind of keep that in mind. When you come through, the policy is that you wear proper safety protection for whatever you're doing. Know where the first aid kit is located, and maybe check for supplies. Are there protective gloves? Are there bandages? And as I look over here, I do see that there's an MSDS arrow and it's pointing down. There's a binder below. There are some gloves up there that you could wear. There's a first aid kit, bloodborne pathogens kit. And so you want to know where those things are when you enter the room. Also, I just noticed that there's a flammable cabinet, which if you have something that's flammable, you'd want to store those in there to reduce the chance of, if a canister was exposed to flame or sparks, it could become explosive. So if you use something like that, you may want to make sure that you return it back to those areas. Again, report all injuries. If you have an injury, you want to report it to the mentor. Long hair must be secured to prevent entanglement. Excuse me. Loose clothing, a hazard. Rolling the sleeves up mid-arm or up to the elbow or past is definitely a recommendation. You can reduce the chances. Yesterday I was working at a drill press. My sleeves were rolled up, but I reached back to make an adjustment on the table. As I reached back, I noticed that where the drill chuck was and where my sleeve is, they were coming in close contact with one another. And I made a point to mention to the students, do you see how close my sleeve is to that drill chuck? Be aware as you're moving about, am I setting myself up for an injury? While I'm on the loose clothes, let me talk. Do you all know what a pedestal grinder is? Anybody? A grinding wheel that rotates and it's on a stand. It's a pedestal. If it was mounted to a workbench, you'd call it a bench grinder. But the wheels rotate. This day there was a pedestal grinder and a student was using that, and he had a hoodie on, and it had baggy sleeves. He had turned to talk to someone, or something had caught his attention. As he turned, his sleeve got caught in that grinding wheel, and it pulled it in, and he managed to get free from it, but before he did, it ripped and tore the sleeve pretty bad. There was a pile of cotton dust on the floor below and on the grinder. It scared him so bad, that day he decided he would not come back to the shop ever again. There was no injury. It didn't get to his skin. He had no physical injury to his body, but to his mind and his emotion, it scared him enough that he said, I don't ever want to come back here again. I hope that experience doesn't happen to you. But the reason why we go over this is to kind of make you aware of the situation, the potential hazards, and so that you function and operate safely, and that you never have an injury. Okay? So loose clothing definitely can be a hazard. Yes? Yes. You know, my students will say, Mr. Simon, you have so many stories. How do you know all this? And I'm like, you know, over the years, I'm 50 years old, and I've had people tell me stories. I've seen things happen. You know, there was a guy, Ed Neal was his name. He worked at Naval Ordnance, and he had told me a story about a girl that was working at Naval Ordnance, and that the co-workers had told her repeatedly, you need to keep your hair pulled back. You need to keep your hair pulled back. And she wouldn't listen. Well, the day came, she was running a drill press, and she got her hair caught in the drill press. And the thing with the drill press is it's very powerful. I mean, this drill is turning, it's able to penetrate the material, the steel if you're cutting. Very powerful. Well, he said that it caught her hair up and it wound it up. And when it pulled, it didn't just pull the hair out, it pulled out a big plug of skin as well. And so the girl ended up going to the hospital, the woman, and she never returned to work. But that machine, kind of gross, he said they left that hair and that skin on that machine and put a note there. This is what can happen to you if you don't keep your hair pulled back. And so it was a reminder to the people, the employees, that of the potential. And so it just kind of made everybody else alert. They were trying to encourage the person to follow the safety guidelines, but wasn't interested. You know, going back to the fumes, and I told this story in the summer. There was a guy named John that worked at the company I used to work at. And I had walked around the corner one day, and John was climbing up the side of a forklift. And he had a cage on the forklift lifted all the way up to the top. And he climbed into the cage. He was changing the lights, the overhead lights in the shop area. And I hollered up to John. I said, hey, don't let me see you do that again. If you need to be raised up, just ask one of us. We'll raise you. If you need to be lowered, we'll lower you back down. I said, if you fall, you could land on one of the pieces of equipment or a bench, or you could be seriously hurt. And he said, okay. And it was probably about 2 weeks later, John was found dead at the company. And what had happened was he had went into a low container with some cleaning solvent, and he was cleaning the container. And because of the fumes, they were so strong, there was not enough oxygen. And he became overcome by the fumes, and he, I guess, fell in there, but he continued breathing as best he could. He died. He died of asphyxiation. And it was a sad situation. He didn't take the necessary precautions for the situation that he was in. So, you know, I don't think that anybody in here is going to be in that kind of environment that you would be overcome by excessive fumes. But the reason why I share the stories, again, is just to kind of pave the way for awareness, and so that you keep yourself safe. You keep others safe. If you saw someone operating unsafely, say, hey, keep this in mind. And you may explain why. Okay? If you have any kind of rotating cutters, avoid contact with your skin. If it's a drill bit or other cutters, if it's this can actually cause an injury. If you have a circular saw that you're using, this saw blade can cause a severe injury. So avoid contact with those areas in all possibilities. You want to avoid that. The drugs. Avoid drugs. If you, and I hope that no one would be using drugs before coming into a shop environment, because your senses are impaired. You may take risks that you wouldn't normally take. And so definitely encourage you to not be involved in any of that, because you set yourself up or even set others up for injury.
You talk about medical drugs.
Yeah, with that is, take for instance, you're on some type of medication that could impair your ability to operate a car or other machinery. If you're on something like that, I would definitely recommend that you suggest or mention to the mentor, say, hey, I'm on medication, my ability could be impaired at this moment. I'm going to be here, but I will not operate any equipment that could put me at risk. And so, you know, just mentioning that, you don't have to tell about what you're on or any of that stuff, but if it's something that could impair your ability to function properly. I have students that could be on medication, they're sick. They come in, they say, hey, Simon, I want you to know that I'm sick, I'm taking medicine, and that I really don't want to work on the machines. I said, hey, that's no problem. Do you feel comfortable cleaning? Maybe, you know, doing a little sweeping or something like that. If they feel comfortable, fine. If not, I'll put them off to the side, maybe make them go sit in the office just for today and just get out of the environment if you need to. And so, just creating that awareness that I'm on a medication, and it's necessary right now. Something else that can be set you up for an injury is if you're distracted by something, a personal situation in your life that's disturbing. I've had students come in and they could have an argument with another individual and they're upset about it. Rather than forcing the student to, hey, you got to work on your project, you have to get this done, you have to make progress. If I'm aware, if I sense that something's going on and they're not at their peak, if they're not able to function, or if I'm concerned that your mind's not in it, don't run a piece of equipment. If you think there's something that you can't stay focused on your responsibilities or what you're doing, I would suggest that you avoid running a piece of equipment that could set yourself up. If you're distracted, if your mind's distracted on something, you could have a pet that has an injury, or you lost a pet, and you could really become emotional because they're like family. If something like that is disturbing you, and to the point that you feel like you're not there completely enough to operate a piece of equipment or to perform tasks that you need to do, sometimes it's best just to avoid that. I ride a motorcycle from time to time, and there have been times when I've been distracted because of something going on personally in my life, and I'll say, you know what, I'm not getting on that machine, because if I'm not focusing and I go through an intersection, I could be killed by another vehicle. If I'm not focusing 100% of the time, I could go off the side of the road and become injured. And so, even for me, if I'm operating a vehicle that could put myself at risk, I try and take precautions or avoid that situation completely. All right, is there anything in particular that maybe came to mind as I'm going through this outline or these stories that you might want to share, or that you might want to mention to others, or bring up that maybe I didn't bring up that you think is important? Anybody have anything? What is it? Food or drink in the shop? Are there policies that they may have about bringing food and drink in? Yeah.
About food in the back area, and then the food was like conditions and stuff, but see, like, we're allowed to eat, and they've got a little like kitchen area thing over there too.
Okay. Hey, one of the things that I want to mention to you, this is kind of a general overview on safety, but I didn't talk to you about operating this, a hand drill. And I didn't talk to you about operating this, a grinder, right? It has a guard on it. Obviously, I wouldn't want to touch this. Let me see if it works. The power backs off. And I didn't talk to you about specifics about how to operate and saw with this. We didn't talk about any other particulars about machinery. And so when it comes to operating a particular machinery, that's where there really needs to be some additional training. And so with that, with every piece of equipment, you usually get an operator's manual, owner's manual that gives you proper instructions on how to operate that. Whether it's myself, or even if it's one of you all that took on the training, and take, for instance, you wanted to conduct a training class on how to properly operate a drill press, a hand drill. I'm not sure what, well, here comes Tammy here. You might want to ask her, because one of the things I was thinking about, there's such things called train the trainer. If we had individuals within the group that felt comfortable enough to maybe talk to a mentor to set up a training class on a piece of equipment, you could do that and actually write a procedure of policies for operating a piece of equipment. You could maybe videotape those instructions, and then if a student or if one of you all wanted to operate a piece of equipment, maybe you had it where you could go to that catalog of videos and you could watch a video for this instruction. You could read some particulars about the safety with this piece of equipment. I think that would be great, and that would really help you all as individuals on setting up the training researching the information, and then conducting the training for your team members. All right. So, did she take off again? Have you all talked about any of that? Where you all performed the training yourself?
We've been doing some practice on the tools. We haven't had like a full training.
Okay. All right. I think that, and I did mention that to Tammy the other day about the possibility of you all setting up training and conducting training yourselves. And so it would be beneficial. And we talked about a training matrix. Have you all heard about kind of a training matrix to where if drill press, say, is on the list, who has received proper training or hand drill on how to operate that? If circular saw is on the list, who knows how to properly operate a circular saw? And so those are the kind of things, if you had a training matrix that you had each piece of equipment and you identified these people are qualified to use this, it would actually reduce your chances for an injury because you'd have people properly trained on each piece of equipment. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. All right. Anybody else have anything else you want to add to it? No? All right. Hopefully you found the training informative and it will keep you safe in the future. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.